Breaking news: the Israeli government has compared the conflict in Gaza to World War II. Justifying brutality is the opinion of the experts. According to Netanyahu, the conflict in Gaza is on par with World War II. However, experts argue that this narrative fails to take into account the past, skirts the issue's origins, and dehumanizes the Palestinian people. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was summoned to address the high number of civilian casualties in the Palestinian enclave of Gaza after 3 weeks of Israel's relentless bombardment campaign against the Strip. Here, Netanyahu sought validation from World War II, after previously citing the 9/11 attacks on New York's Twin Towers and the Pentagon in 2001 to characterize the lethal Hamas attack on southern Israel on October 7. The hawkish Israeli Prime Minister brought up the incident in 1945. He really brought up 1944, when an 86-child school in Copenhagen was accidentally bombed by a British air raid that had been aiming at a Gestapo site. That is not a war crime, he informed the press. You can't hold the British government responsible for that. The tragic consequences that accompany such lawful acts of war do not diminish the legitimacy of the action itself. For Israel, the ostensible pursuit of Hamas militants in Gaza has become an excuse to kill hundreds of civilians, and the wartime Allied campaign against Nazi Germany and Japan has become a historical precedent in this regard. C.P. Hodavli, Israel's ambassador to the UK, has drawn parallels between Israel's campaign and the Allied bombing of Dresden, which occurred over 3 nights in 1945 and killed between 25,000 and 35,000 Germans. The goal was to kill the Nazis and force them to surrender. Supporters of Israel who are not part of the official Israeli government have also made parallels. Still, these endeavors distort the truth about how the Israel-Palestine conflict began in 1948, when 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly removed from their homes, 500 towns and villages were leveled, and Palestinian land was illegally occupied. In addition to ignoring the fact that World War II resulted in a new regime of international law, these arguments dehumanize Palestinians and provide an excuse for Israel's decades-long policy of violence and discrimination against Palestinians, which is compared to apartheid by many international rights organizations. An Israeli socialist activist and historian named Elon Papp told Al Jazeera that Israel is using these initiatives as a justification for its brutal policies towards the Palestinians, and that they are based on an old playbook. He used the example of the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon, when then Prime Minister Menachem Begin likened Yasser Arafat, head of the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, to Hitler and war-torn Beirut to Berlin. In a telegram sent to then-President Ronald Reagan in early August 1982, Begin expressed his authority as Prime Minister to instruct a brave army facing Berlin, where, among innocent civilians, Hitler and his henchmen hide in a bunker deep beneath the surface. 1982, August 11. Amos Oz, an Israeli novelist, said that the urge to revive Hitler, only to kill him again and again, is the result of pain that poets can permit themselves to use, but not statesmen, in reference to Begin's statements, which led to criticism from many within Israel. Another kind of ahistorical thinking is looking to the past to justify present-day disputes. Israelis appear determined to wish away the post-1945 pledge by lawyers, NGOs, activists, and politicians to say we need a better system so civilians do not suffer needlessly in war zones, according to Scott Lucas, a U.S. and British foreign policy expert at the University of Birmingham who has studied Israel's ruthless war on Gaza. He continued by saying that Israel's claims to be part of an Allied-like struggle are dishonest because of its refusal to join the International Criminal Court, ICC, and its efforts to actively undermine the authority of the United Nations, which was established after the tragedies of World War II and the Holocaust. Because they have demanded a ceasefire, Israel has often claimed that UN agencies and officials, notably Secretary General Antonio Guterres, are biased. Israeli bombs in Gaza since October 7 have killed more UN staff members than in any conflict in the organization's history. Even though Lucas admitted that civilians will be killed in wartime, he went on to say that Israel seemed to be violating the proportionality requirement of international law. Basically, the military must be able to prove that the military gains from targeting civilian areas, such as hospitals, schools, and shelters, are proportional to the civilian casualties caused by the war. Israel has been repeatedly attacked on these targets throughout this conflict. Many experts agree that Israel hasn't achieved that standard. According to Lucas, the power launching the attack is not taking enough precautions, which is leading to an excessive number of civilian casualties. That is the standard by which the Israelis should be evaluated. Other narratives, such as those involving World War II, are merely incidental. The analogy to World War II is still being used by Israel's advocates. According to Jake Wallace Simons, editor of the Jewish Chronicle in London, 2 points of similarity were identified between the wars. What Wallace Simons called the first is a sense of existential threat both during World War II and in the attacks by Hamas upon Israel was indeed a concern. The aggressor's nature is the other. Barbarism was how he characterized Hamas's activities. More than 20,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza, and nearly the entire population of 2.3 million people has been displaced. The actions of Israel since October 7 could constitute modern-day genocide, according to UN experts, international human rights groups, and many nations around the world. Human Rights Watch claimed earlier this week that Israel was waging war with food. Since the beginning of the current conflict, Israel has further tightened its restrictions on humanitarian supplies entering the Gaza Strip, which it has kept in place since 2007. Israel has largely maintained its tight ban on the entrance of fuel and water since the beginning of the current conflict. In light of this, German-Palestinian scholar Anna Yunus argued that Israel benefits from projecting the conflict with Palestine onto World War II. It aids Israel in dehumanizing Palestinians and lessens empathy for their plight. Accusing Palestinians and their supporters of Nazism is as simple as associating Israel with Judaism, Yunus told Al Jazeera. As a result, Nazism has evolved into a platform for all things pertaining to Eurocentrism on a global scale, and is thus entitled to death without regard for context or empathy.